Hello, welcome everyone to our latest episode of Leading with Agility.
Leading with Agility, hello.
Hello everyone, welcome back to all our listeners and many new followers and subscribers as well. Thank you very much.
Yes. A lot of people have been flocking into our podcast, which is great. Lovely to see, and this all of you.
Yes, thank you so much. It means a lot, and it's appreciated.
It is.
But so TK, you want to say hello to our audience, our listeners? Anything you want to share before we get started this week?
Hello, our dear audience, because I don't know when you'll be listening to it.
Yes.
If you're listening to it as it premieres, next week we're at the World of Learning in London and at the Olympia. So come and visit us, join us and see what we're up to. But if you're not, you can always come and visit us on the podcast or on LinkedIn.
That's right. Yeah, we're virtually around. But yes, as TK said, we'll be in person in London, in Olympia. If you're around, so it would be good to meet you. But I mean, my week's been crazy. We've had with that planning that we're doing for next week. It's just been intense, and I am struggling to keep up with time. I thought it was Monday only yesterday, but now we're Thursday today. So yeah, it's a bit crazy.
It is, and you just revealed that recording on Thursday. We are.
Yes, it is Thursday today. But yeah, exactly. But I mean, yeah, it's just too much. So anyway, with all of that, I thought let's take a break. Let's record today's episode and go somewhere different a bit, I think. Last week, or in our last show, we were talking and exploring a range of leadership failures across that entire post office scandal, which has become headline news, and it's still, I think, in the news agenda.
Still going, yeah.
Still going, sadly. So, yeah, we talked a lot about that and some of the challenges that we observed and some of our thoughts, and we talked about ethical leadership and so on. But today, I think I wanted to explore a different dimension to leadership, and this was more around what happens when decisions are led primarily from beliefs and ideology. So this is, it sounds a bit scary saying it like that, but I think
dangerous grounds. Yes.
But I think it's true. It happens, and I think
we think, yeah.
In a lot of organizations and what can I say? Environments where leadership occurs, people do it without even realizing they do it, I think. But yeah, I don't know, TK, what are your thoughts on that in terms of beliefs, ideology, and how people lead?
Well, ideology for me is just a strong belief, right? A set of beliefs we're holding. And of course, like, for instance, we, the humble associates, we do have some strong beliefs and values ourselves. Some things are out of questions for us to do. And, some things are just quite normal, right? If, for instance, we feel like we didn't do a good job, which rarely happens, but if it does, we will make up for it. And we did in the past.
We have,
so we don't even need to talk about it, right? So one would say this is a strong belief we hold. And as we're leaders in our business, we help our team and set the tone for our team and model the behavior for our team to, reflect the beliefs of the organization.
No, good framing for today's conversation. But I think to kick us off, and let's get straight into it, because there's a lot I want to talk about, and I'm sure you do too, TK. There's this very famous phrase or saying, which I'm sure you've heard, which is doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting a different result, right? So this is this idea that people who whether it's making decisions or in how they behave, whether in how they act, they do the same things constantly, thinking that it will change something or affect something in a different way, or they'll get a different output. I'm sure you've come across this, DK,
yeah,
right?
Some people call it like training or going to the gym, and the output changes. So that's a bit of a challenge with this saying, but we quite often have a situation where against the odds and against all reason, leaders, like all people, are doing silly things over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, you call them silly, right? And it's funny because there's an element of perspective on this, where those leaders who you think are doing something silly will think, well, no, I think I'm doing the right thing. And we'll come on to maybe some of that, I think, later on. I'd like to explore some of these thoughts in a bit more detail.
Yeah, it's interesting that not many people are willing to do things intentionally wrong.
Yeah. No, exactly. Well, this is the whole ideology bit, and we're going to talk about that, which is you're saying there that they don't want to intentionally do anything wrong, but when you are driven by really strong beliefs that mean you are unable to take into account other variables into your decision making, what's the impact? I think that's the crux of today's conversation for me. That's what I want to explore.
It's interesting because I don't want to go there necessarily. It's not what we want to talk about. But when someone mentions very strong beliefs, for me, the one thing that comes to mind is religion.
Yes.
But getting out of it, we can talk about our leaders from the political spectrum.
Yes. So in the news this week, so earlier in the week, or a few days ago, a clip of President Biden went viral. And when he was asked by a reporter a question about recent airstrikes that his government and other Western governments have been conducting in Yemen. So I just want to play the clip for you. Hopefully we can cue it up. So Listen to this from him, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working?
Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
And yeah, it's quite an interesting clip, isn't it, Arif?
Well, exactly. And I think what shook me was the candid response from him. I was really...
Ad-lib, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just shocked at that, the admission of no, straight away saying, are they working? No, they're not. But we're going to keep doing it anyway. And so there was a real head-scratching moment for me. And I think probably partly why it went viral, and political commentators, military commentators, I'm sure, all had a field day on those comments. But for me, what struck me, as I said, is the candid nature of that admission that we're doing something which isn't working, but we're still going to continue doing it.
Yes, and I've got my own take on it personally, which might be different to yours. So, yeah, the President of the United States of America. Some would argue the most powerful leader in the world. And Americans are what they are, who they are. And I think, by him saying that, with all his military might, getting other nations involved too, famously Britain, so there we are, he is actually, I think, he's not necessarily admitting that he's wrong. He's making a statement. The way I read it is, it's not working yet. So we'll bomb you to the kingdom come until you finally understand the show of force.
That could be the strategy. I don't know. And I didn't really want to go into that too much today. It was just how that statement came out and his,
funny.
and his reaction and his candidness in admitting something that you don't typically hear from a government leader or a politician
indeed,
right?
Yeah.
So that's what shook me. And I think what I wanted to, it made me think about was, if we look, historically, whether it's organizations that some of you listening work in, and you may be leaders yourselves, or whether it's, as we said, politicians and leaders of countries, there is something about ignoring previous lessons of failure, but still going ahead and perhaps making decisions without taking any of that account. I think we can find other examples where that has happened in our working lives. I'm sure TK and I, we can find those, we can relay those. This isn't uncommon, is it, TK? It happens. That's my point.
Yes, and I think there's multiple reasons why it's the case. I think one of the reasons that you, Arif, know that I'm quite guilty of is the reluctance to do nothing, or aversion to inaction, or bias to action, right? It's you have to do something. It's like trade is being disrupted. You're a powerful leader, so you need to do something. You can't just, even if it's wrong,
which
you're doing something.
Which then leads to, you're right, and I think there is something in there that may be different in terms of how it plays out for a politician versus perhaps a leader in an organization in terms of that biased action. So it is possibly, we could argue, maybe, and a reasoning could be, well, if you're in an organizational setting, financial results, company performance, etc., those factors will have a bearing on your, as you said, biased action and your willingness to just do something. As opposed to, for politicians, it could be votes, staying in power, and things like that, right? So there are these factors and variables that we don't always think about that cause the behaviors that we see.
Well, I think, any leadership has a political element to it. And one would say that, a leader in an organization, commercial organization, or any other kind, even nonprofit, it's an appointment that they always feel like they need to look at their backs and see if someone is out to get them. So I would say, as a leader myself, it's just important to show I'm taking action. The problems are being dealt with. And many people will interpret the lack of action as incompetence.
So, I mean, I think I would say you're probably giving a very conservative, not say conservative. What is that the word I'm looking for? And a very accommodating, shall we say, qualification or reason for that behavior. I'm going a bit stronger than that. I think there is something to be said for, going back to the start, the ideology or belief perspective in what drives people to make decisions that they do, or leaders to make decisions that they do. So let me just clarify that. What I mean, if we take the political sphere, like we just did earlier, whether it's Biden, we know what's happening, unfortunately, in Israel-Palestine at the moment. And so you can look at all of that and say there is a lot happening there, and with lives at stake and so much going on in terms of, war and devastation and destruction, etc. All of that going on, driven by people's beliefs or ideology and what they think is the right thing to do. Perhaps not necessarily looking at the whole picture or wanting to look at the whole picture because there are powerful reasons why they don't want to. That's where I'm coming at this from, I think, TK.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting, like you spoke about these difficult situations, and I think these leaders are, well, actually, these are elected that we speak of, and to get elected, they had to stand on a platform, and they probably believe the things they say.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Which this is where I'm coming now. Let's switch it to an organizational context, back to many of our listeners perhaps and where they're coming from. I think there is something we can still draw from that, which is, we do find, and I can find examples, as I said earlier, of people I've worked with who, I'll give you an example. Here we go. So I worked at a telecoms business many years ago, and part of a team, and the senior manager there was really of the belief or the view that this particular idea that he had would be successful, to the point where it was his main mission to ensure that idea came to fruition, that we were able to build that and deliver it to customers. The challenge for us in the team was we wanted to take a slightly different approach, a more, I wouldn't say skeptical approach, but a more logical approach of saying, can we assess this idea of yours? Can we test it out perhaps? Can we explore what's viable, what's not viable? Let's just logically
challenge your God-given right to make decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Challenge it in a fair way, and that came up to a lot of resistance. We found a lot of resistance trying to even broach the subject or have the right conversations. It was really difficult, but we got to a point there was some degree of compromise in terms of phasing the idea into our customers and not delivering it all in one go, and so some movement occurred, which was great. But it, I think, is an example for me of a leader who had a deep belief and a deep, maybe ideological belief. I don't know however you want to describe it, that their idea was correct, it was the right thing to do, and that it needed to be fulfilled. It needed to be, served up to our customers, irrespective of anything else. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, TK.
For many people, their belief is that a leader's job is to be right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have a traditional understanding of leadership, traditional, a very outdated and, to be very mild, silly definition of leadership, which is to tell people what to do, you obviously have to think you're right to tell them to do the things that you believe are the right things to do. And since, they're just mindless peons in your eyes, how dare they push back? I'm obviously joking, but if you believe in this big man style of leadership or big woman, it feels like you have to have a monopoly on truth and right decisions, which you never have. You're a human being, sorry to burst your bubble, but you're as wrong as everyone else is, and your team might know better. Just as Arif said.
And the thing is, I think beyond that, we haven't talked about, I don't know if we'll have time today, but I just thought of it now, is the impact this has on all the people you're leading, right? So like you just alluded to a little bit there, TK, you've got the team around you, you've got, people who are highly skilled, specialized experience, etc. And that belief of yours is overriding your ability to take into account alternative views, right? So
there's more.
Yeah.
It's like the story I told, I think, on the second episode, which is like, oh, no, I have to be right because I have to have their respect. And if they're challenging me, they're not respecting me. And respect is so needed for leadership.
Yeah.
And that I have to derive it from, so there you go, right? These two things in leadership that's ineffective based on this antiquated, outdated model that is still being practiced and our culture and literature is full of, brings these results.
So just to kind of reinforce a little bit of what I'm saying, and because this isn't just me, so I've done some reading, and I want to share this with our listeners as well, and I came across this. It's a book, but there's also some research and some papers that these two gentlemen have written. Jeffrey, I think it's Pfeffer. I can't. I'm sorry if I've pronounced your name wrong, Professor. And the
names in the description of the podcast.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna. Yes, so everything that we're talking about, all sources as ever, we put in the episode description. So please check it out in there. We want to make sure we don't talk just because we think we know something, but we are talking because we've got some evidence or, some facts.
Damn, I haven't got the memo.
Exactly. Well, that's what we try to do here, TK. Come on. So yeah, please check the episode description for more of what we're talking about in terms of sources. But yeah, so Jeffrey Pfeffer, I'm going to say it like that, and Robert Sutton, both professors from Stanford, have been doing some research. This is going back a bit now. So they produced this research out in 2006. So it's slightly old, but I think still relevant. And they've also written a book as well. The book is called Hard Facts, Dangerous Half-Truths and Total Nonsense. I think that's an epic title.
I do like the title indeed. Yes.
It's a brilliant title. So if you're interested, do check that out in your favorite bookstore. But their research is all about evidence-based management. Now, we'll come to some of that a bit later. But the one thing I just wanted to draw on is that they believe quite strongly that in nearly all settings, leaders don't make decisions based on evidence, but based on beliefs. That's essentially their premise, and that's their premise for their research. And that's what we were kind of been referring to a little bit, talking about already. And one thing I kind of stood out for me is that they are basing a lot of their research and their thoughts on other disciplines, and they look at the discipline of science, medicine, and talk about how, well, if they can do it in those disciplines, as in, those disciplines are very much based on fact, evidence, science, etc. Why shouldn't leaders do that in everything they do? That's the question for discussion. TK, any response? And then we can move on to something else.
No, I have a response. I'm just trying not to repeat myself over and over again. That it's okay. So the main thing when I'm talking to leaders, especially when I'm starting working with them, it's the social role of leadership that's being imposed on people, even the ones that have a talent for leadership, and there is such a thing that you have to be right all the time, and you can't admit that you're wrong. And as such, changing your mind based on the reality of facts might be admitting that you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's dangerous. Could be dangerous.
The other situation is dangerous, which is not changing your mind. And again, this is
and so that's
to do with the social definition of leadership. Very antiquated and outdated.
But also,
leader reflects.
Sorry, you're right. A leader reflects. But also, just to add to your point, I said dangerous, but I think I should qualify that, which is dangerous to who? Dangerous to yourself, or as you said, dangerous to the people or the situation that your decision will impact, right?
Well, especially if you wield the military power of an army.
Exactly. So it's life and death, right? So is it power that you're interested in, or, the life and death of in your hands of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people?
Look, Arif, I'm sure that these people are telling themselves that they're actually saving lives, which many military leaders have done. Through killing other people. That's a totally different discussion, but there is a rationale.
That's a whole ethical, moral conversation for another day. So let's move on. And what I want to talk about now is a bit more about the research of these two professors. And start there. As I said, their whole spiel is around evidential decision making or evidence-based decision making. So, but before we get into it, I think let's just reflect a bit on what this podcast is all about: agile leadership, and this is what we've started. This is why we're here. This is what we want to talk about. Why is it, TK? Do you think that an agile leader needs to recognize the importance of perhaps behaving in a different way? And maybe, in the words of these two professors, taking evidence into their decision-making process, or recognize the importance of testing out their assumptions. What would you say to that?
So an agile leader is not managing people; they're managing the environment. So in effect, first of all, it's a different type of leadership. And most importantly, since agility is based on the test and learn and continuous improvement cycles, perfection is unattainable and you always do improve, right? This is why agility is so hard pressed on factual data, empirical process control, all this wonderful jazz. So to be an agile leader, you absolutely have to reflect on the decision you make and the impact you have. But I think any good leader should do that. I think what agility is really pushing them to do is to do it more frequently. It's not enough to do it every quarter. In some circumstances, you have to do it every 2 weeks or even quicker than that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think this is what I enjoyed reading some of their work, and they kind of their premise, or their kind of the way they set their stall out is they accept actually that managers, leaders have tough jobs, high pressure environments. As we said at the start of the episode, we talked about some of that as well. Where there's this pressure to do things or do something, to be seen to be doing something. They recognize all of that, but for whatever reason, they ignore the evidence out there, or they ignore data, they ignore the kind of fact-based inputs, and they instead rely on outdated information or maybe past experiences to help them make their decisions, which is something I'm sure, as I said, we can all recognise. But they've got a plan, not the plan. Sorry, I should say they've got some solutions to help us out, to help all of us out. And so I think let's talk a bit more about that. What do you think, TK?
Yep, I think definitely. I love to learn about some models, and I'm sure our listeners do too.
Exactly. So they say that there's 4 things that they discuss, really. And we can share some examples of what they've written about, which are interesting examples in their own right. But one of the first things they argue is that if you are a leader, then you need to start from the position of evidence. So it's not about making a compelling claim for why you should do something or why the organization should do something or why your team needs to build something. It's what does the evidence tell you? And this works both ways, I think. So if you're in a team, perhaps you're listening to this and you've got a manager or a leader who's saying, oh, yeah, we should go now and do X. Well, the first thing you should try and do is maybe ask for that evidence. Say, okay, can you provide some data to back up why you believe we should do that? I appreciate that might not be safe for everyone out there, but it's something to definitely think about how you can get that message across.
It's an interesting one, right? And I would possibly think about the phrasing of that, because like you know me, for instance, personally as a leader, the thing I have is like, well, all right, I'm happy to look at that, but I'm definitely not happy doing nothing. For me, time is the one aspect of the universe that we have no way of influencing. So time passes, and you all want to get paid at the end of the month, and we need to do something sometimes if we're in a difficult situation. Now what's important is, okay, let's take some time to reflect and decide, but don't deny that we need to take some action. Now the question is, what's the right action to take? And what's the appropriate time to wait? These are quite difficult questions, I think.
Yeah, and I know I'm sure some of you might be thinking of. It's occurring to me as well. Probably you, TK. There's the idea of analysis paralysis as well, isn't it? So, okay, so how much do I need to research? What do I need to find? Where's how much data do I need to gather to be for this to be? I think the way I read what they're talking about is it's applying that healthy skepticism. It's about saying, are we all collectively clear we're doing something not because someone says we're doing it, but because we all believe this is the right thing to do based on what we understand, right? I think that's the shift.
Which obviously is enabled by collective decision making, which not always is enabled for many people.
That isn't, but it's getting towards that place by at least starting these conversations. I think that's the thing. It's about saying, we're no longer going to just do something because you believe that to be the right thing to do. We're actually going to do something because there is evidence to back up that claim.
It sounds like mutiny, Arif.
Well, you may say that, but I think this is if this is what we're talking about in our podcast, then in terms of agile leadership and what we want to see from leaders, then I think this is the kind of approach we want to start talking about.
It's true, but I'm more interested in how, as a leader, you create a situation where, on the other hand, on one hand, you have the team that's able to do that. You have enough safety and trust to be able to do that.
Yep.
And on the second hand, or yet another hand, you feel that you're being respected and you can fulfill your leadership role in a servant way. That's probably another episode, but something to remember.
We did talk about the other episode we had where we talked about the micromanagement, right? And
yes, we did.
We shared some really important strategies that leaders could take to involve team members into the decision-making process, right? And
take these strategies first, yeah.
Exactly. So, have a think about that. Go back and listen to that episode if you want. But creating that environment makes some of this stuff easier. That's for sure. But if you're in if you're in an environment where you're already there, you think that you have the safety and comfort between yourself as a leader and your team members, then this shouldn't be a huge leap forward, I think.
Nope. You should be used to that, really.
Yeah. So the other thing they talk about, the two professors, is to encourage teams to examine faulty cause and effect logic of any evidence. So, okay, so we ask for evidence, fine, we look at it, but we've got to be careful. So even with evidence, it doesn't mean that you can easily make conclusions or draw conclusions that, okay, well, because I've seen X, that definitely means Y is the answer. So I think, again, there's something to be said here for a collaborative or collective effort where the manager and the team are involved in, some kind of skeptical analysis of what's in front of them.
Dare I say, being open about your own beliefs and biases.
Yeah, exactly. And so it goes back, again, all links back to what we've started with here, beliefs and ideology, as I said. There we go. It's challenging that. Might not be comfortable, but if you are wanting to be better, then this is something you want to really think about. So the next thing that they argue organizations should be doing or leaders should be doing is experimenting more. And so encouraging the idea of experimentation. So, and that's just to test the viability of, any strategy or idea that's been proposed. I really think, and reading this, as I said in the example I shared earlier about my previous experience working in a telecoms company, if we had this then, or if we're able to do more of this at that time, I think we could have produced something even better as an output than what we did. But, that's hindsight for you. But yeah, I can see how this works and how this can apply is what I'm saying.
But in terms of experimentation, it has the scientific name for a reason. It's a rigorous process. You should understand how long you're experimenting for. What's your experiment design?
Yes.
What are the results that you're expecting or the criteria of it? Like screwing around is not experimenting. Doing something is not experimenting. It's just doing something on a whim. Experimenting is understanding what are the actions you're taking and how you will evaluate and what will you measure and how you will evaluate this measurement and how long will it take. Like this can really save you as a leader by saying, okay, fine, I think we should do X, but if you're so inclined, let's spend a week experimenting with Y with this criteria, and we either do X based on the data or Y based on what the experiment will say. And it's not just doing nothing.
No, and that's totally, that's correct. And I think this goes to something else. Okay, actually, you know what? I'll hold that thought. Let's finish this and then I'll come back to it because then I'll deviate and lose track. So the fourth kind of approach they suggest organizations should take up, or leaders especially, is we've said this before, reinforce continuous learning. And that it follows neatly on from this experiment conversation that we've just been having. Because if you are not taking into account what's happened before, what's not worked, and then applying that into how do you actually get better? I know it sounds silly, but again, I'm going to go back to where we started at today's episode, and we did talk. We dabbled into politics a little bit, and we touched on what's happening in the world right now. But I think again, it for me reinforces the same point that we don't see enough of this continuous learning, or learning from past mistakes, or learning from history. That's what I would say here.
I'll give you an example. So an interesting example how it can go against the cultural grain. So I was working at one point with a team, and one member of the team was an older person, much older than myself. And we've completed a bit of a milestone. And I went into this person's office, say, congratulations, great stuff. We've completed it. Would you be open to reflect a bit on what we've done? Mm-hmm. He was like surprised. So he said, okay. And I said, okay, let's start by reflecting on what you're proud about. What do you think you've done that you're really proud of? And it's like looking at me, it's like, oh, that's very strange. It's not preschool. What are you talking about? I was like, and I persisted. I said, well, I think it's important to acknowledge the great work that you've done and, just to reflect on it. And he was taken aback, but he relented and found things he was proud of. And in the next 2 weeks, when we, had another good milestone and a delivery increment, I remember going back to him, and he already had a list prepared of things he was proud of. I think he liked it.
Amazing.
So the
Really
continuous
nice.
learning isn't natural for everyone.
No, it's
He
not.
clearly wasn't expecting that I'll ask him a question like this.
And I think this also, to me, and reading some of the research paper that the two professors have written, there's a lot there around the culture. It really, always is. But the way they've put this together I was just like, yes. Why this is written in 2006? It applies now in 2023. Or sorry, 2024. Gosh, can't get my time.
So outdated, Aaron.
Oh gosh, right. And so there's here's an example, right? So just to build on what you're saying, they interviewed. This is 2000. This was something going back 2005. So they interviewed the CEO of eBay at that time in 2005, a lady named Meg Whitman, and she was talking about this again along the lines of experimentation, continuous learning, and she said at that time eBay fairly new. And the quote is, "This is a completely new business, so there's only so much analysis you can do. Instead, it's better to put something out there and see the reaction and fix it on the fly. You could spend 6 months getting it perfect in the lab, but we're better off spending 6 days putting it out there, getting feedback, and then evolving it." So there we go. That's going back 2005. I don't see anything in that quote that tells me we shouldn't be doing that in 2024, or leaders shouldn't be adopting that same mindset now.
Oh, yeah, as though I do understand, and I agree. You know what they say, the founder of LinkedIn has a nice saying, which is, if you're not ashamed of your product you've released too late.
Yeah.
And every time I say that, there is a person or two that's really outraged by what I just said. It's like, this is impossible. No, you can't release and so on. And it's like, well, I'm still
Careful
using
language.
LinkedIn. I'm not necessarily happy about
everything.
Well, many things, but I'm using it and I'm paying for it. So there you go, right? It's a philosophy that you adopt. It might not be a great philosophy for every industry. I think aerospace and medicine might look twice before implementing this.
Yeah. Well, I get it. I get what you're saying, but I think the cultural aspect of, okay, can we create an environment that supports this type of mindset or behavior of making sure we're doing things because, as I said, because there's evidence, there's data, science behind whatever it might be, and not because we want to do it for the sake of doing it, right? I think that's what it still speaks to me. That's what it still speaks to in the broader sense. I appreciate that particular example is may not be applicable universally. I do get that, but there is a cultural. There is a call to a certain culture that quote and the discussion the two professors are having in this article that speaks to what we're talking about, I think.
Indeed. And there are strategies, but in fact one would say that it's all about the culture. I think when it comes to Eastern, like Japan, with the Kaizen cycle and the relentless pursuit of perfection, well, that helps, but not every culture has that.
But that good you've mentioned that, because we haven't talked about this, which is, okay, someone listening was, well, so what do I do? How do I actually do this? So there are lots of techniques out there, Kaizen, PDCA. I'm sure there are many others that we can think of, all talking about or all advocating for how to put some of this into practice, right? How do you create that approach, that leadership approach, where you are, looking at what's in front of you, assessing it skeptically, healthily, with some healthy skepticism, applying experiments and testing things out to at least,
in fact, Yeah, this is what agility is all about. This is why we call agility a leadership model, and this is why we're helping leaders become agile leaders.
And on that note, I think there's just one last thing I wanted to share. Some interesting data and that spoke to some of this. I think I was looking for. I was looking at. Okay, so what's the impact of not doing all this has? Right, difficult to find in terms of raw numbers, but one number stood out to me, and this is so a global leadership a global leadership development and HR firm called DDI. They've done some research analysis, and they've quantified the impact of poor leadership when it comes to everything from staff churn to staff happiness, productivity of that leader, all of that, and they've quantified it to a company can cost a company more than $126,000 over the course of a year if they employ someone who unfortunately isn't as effective in their leadership role in the way maybe some of the things that we've been talking about they could be doing better in. I don't know if you want to react to that, TK.
I mean, if I find competent leaders and employ them, we'll be making quite a lot of money. Yes,
exactly. So there we are. That was an interesting fact to end on. But thank you for listening to today's episode, all about how, I guess, leadership decision-making should be made, how perhaps not to do it, what lessons we can learn from the world around us, current affairs, and other examples that we've shared today. TK, I don't know, do you have any summary thoughts on what we've discussed? How would you like to summarize our discussion?
Yeah, now the onus is on me to say something wise.
Deep breath.
To be honest, it just seems like throughout the episodes of our podcasts, we're approaching different things from different angles and yet coming with similar conclusions.
Interesting.
That agile leadership, when it's not being applied, is a huge cost to your organization. So it's something that you really want to, however you call it, whatever method you use. And it's just such a waste for leaders not to do their job correctly.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for that, TK. That's a profound thought to think about and ponder over, and I hope our listeners can do that. And I don't have anything more to add apart from, I think, perhaps to all of the leaders out there listening, I hope you can think about or digest on some of the words we've been sharing with you today, and doing some reflection on your own leadership style. And is there one thing you can do differently or one thing you can do better to maybe align with some of the ideas we've shared today? That would be my request to all of you listening. So on that note, thank you very much. That's all we've got time for in today's episode. And thank you very much for listening and being with us. TK, any last words?
See you soon. Yeah. Hopefully we can hear you in the next episode of Leading with Agility.
That's right. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the episode or subscribe to the podcast. And please do share it on to anyone else in your network. Thank you very much.
Yes, because Arif is constantly giving me the numbers.
Exactly.
So do that.
Yeah, do share it. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.